Christian Horner, the Red Bull team boss, worries the rules for the 2026 Formula 1 engine. His remarks are interpreted in two ways by the competition. Either Red Bull Ford Powertrains is having engine development issues, or they want to postpone the start of the regulations. Which one of these would be more likely? And why would they want it? There are still 30 months to go. Are the upcoming engine regulations such a game changer that the team bosses will have a fight over it? Christian Horner believes Formula 1 should be cautious with these huge changes. Red Bull's team leader recognizes the risk of the top class generating a Frankenstein monster, one that, in public, would make them and battery technology appear immature. We're talking about the future engine formula that will be used in Formula 1 starting in 2026. It calls for an equal mix of combustion engine and electric power. There are various dangers hiding here for Horner. For starters, the batteries will undoubtedly expand in size, increasing the weight of the cars dramatically. Today, it weighs at least 798 kilograms. We're talking about an additional 30 kilograms for Formula cars, which are already approaching sports car dimensions. The size of the battery will be colossal. The cooling would have to be significantly expanded, said Horner. Second, Horner is concerned that on some circuits, cars will have to enter charging mode far before the actual braking point to replenish their energy reserves. Based on the simulations, his driver Max Verstappen agrees with him. If you go full throttle at Monza, you have to downshift 400 or 500 meters before the braking point because it's faster. From my point of view, that can't be the right way for the future. Of course, Monza is one of the worst tracks with the long straights, but for me, it looks like Formula 1 is becoming a pure engine formula again, says Max Verstappen. Horner also advises against dull procession without overtaking moves. With a Frankenstein, we would have to design the aerodynamics in such a way that the air resistance is drastically reduced via moving parts. That could lead to the fact that there is no slipstream effect anymore. DRS would be pointless. Horner has several suggestions for better racing from the Red Bull point of view. We still have time. If we shift the distribution of power by 5 or 10% in favour of the combustion engine, the problems could be solved. Formula 1 has set the goal of balancing the 1.6-litre 6-cylinder turbocharged engine with the MG UK electric machine. A 50-50 split is envisioned. The combustion engine, like the hybrid components, is expected to produce roughly 350 kilowatts apiece. In all parameters, that's around 476 horsepower each. Horner wishes to change this ratio. He is alleged to have been pressuring the Formula 1 Commission for this for months. In addition to the 10 teams, it includes members of the FIA and Formula 1 management. The team boss at Red Bull wants to boost the internal combustion engine, which he believes will not dilute the overall message of a more ecologically friendly Formula 1. In any case, Formula 1 is moving to 100% renewable fuel, so the turbo engine could produce 385 kilowatts while the battery could produce only 315 kilowatts, or change the ratio to 420 to 280 kilowatts. Clearly, Horner is now on his own with this endeavour. The bulk of the paddock believes he has a plan. What else is there? In this regard, every team is the same. They're all looking for an advantage. The top class is like a shark tank, with practically everyone primarily concerned with themselves. Opponents say that Red Bull, with its newly formed engine company, RB Ford Powertrains, either has developmental issues or intends to create such dread that everything remains the same for the time being. A voice from the paddock said the following: "Red Bull is so superior under the current regulations. If I were in their position, I would prefer no change either." More people around the paddock think Red Bull are whining, and Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff said it publicly. Just because they're not making progress with their engine program, they come around the corner with something like this. There is always a motive behind such statements. There is zero chance that we'll tilt or shift the ratio. These engine regulations have lured Audi into Formula 1 and are bringing Honda back. They were at the table when it was negotiated. Manufacturers like General Motors are also interested in joining Formula 1 under the proposed engine regulations, so there are enough suitors. Because the Brackley race team is a customer of HPP, Christian Horner has questioned how close Toto Wolff is to the Mercedes Formula 1 2026 power unit plan. Horner hinted that he's more aware of what is going on at the new Red Bull Powertrains subsidiary, which he formerly manages, and is based in Milton Keynes alongside the Red Bull race team. He made the remarks as part of his warning that the 2026 standards must be amended to prevent the necessity for Frankenstein cars, and that the existing balance of combustion engine and electrical power should be reconsidered. In response, Wolff claims that Horner is frightened because Red Bull is falling behind on its 2026 development plan. Horner, for his part, feels the reverse is true, and that RBPT recognised the possible limits of the new regulations early since it is ahead of certain competitors. I'm not sure how close Toto is to his engine business, because he's a customer, he's not involved in HPP's business formally, he said. The feedback that I'm getting from the business, and as you start to see the program really coming to life, and as the simulations firm up, are some of the limitations, which are inevitable. So I would say it's perhaps as a result of us maybe being well advanced that we're actually seeing some of the limitations. And I think that not for self-gain here as an engine manufacturer, just looking holistically at the whole lot, looking at the compromises we're going to have to make on the chassis regs with fully active auto to compensate for the recovery on the engine, it still doesn't feel too late to tune that ratio. And it wouldn't take much. It's not like we're saying we have to rip everything up and start again. It's whether you do it in a fuel flow or the cell mass, you just need to change the ratio slightly to ensure that we're getting great racing. Red Bull will join Ferrari as one of only 2 teams that develop its chassis and power unit in the same location. Regarding his own role at RBP, he said, "You've got to have a good team of people around you, and it's how efficient you are with your team." So for me, I've always been a big believer in giving responsibility and accountability to the people that you empower, because there's no point me telling them how to design an engine. I can't do that. What I can do is set the direction, set the targets, and make sure they get the right facilities, the right infrastructure, the right support. So it's about having the right team and network around you, and how you then apportion and apply your time. Manufacturers can run the 6-cylinder turbo on the test bench since mid-2022 according to the regulations. According to reports, Red Bull is really running slightly behind schedule. There would be teething issues which is expected for a project based on white paper. The internal combustion engine from Milton Keynes is said to be roughly 10 horsepower short of the aim. According to reports, Mercedes got off to the biggest start, but according to the paddock radio, Red Bull Ford Powertrains was ahead of Ferrari. It's all rumours, of course. Engineers, on the other hand, enjoy talking amongst themselves. But one thing remains, and that is that the regulations are intricate. The 2026 power unit is not the same as the existing one. The combustion process must be modified by the manufacturers. Different compression ratios will be used. The turbocharger will be more compact. The flow rate of petrol will drop. For reasons of complexity, the hot electric machine MGUH will be discontinued. It is irrelevant for series development since the load is insufficient. To make sense, a road car would have to consistently exceed 200 km an hour to siphon off surplus energy from the turbo. The absence of the MGUH costs the power unit about 70 kilowatts of electricity. The battery is an enormous playground. The rules allow the same size as we currently have, Mercedes engine chief Hal Thomas adds. You can see what the manufacturers are up against with 3 times the projected output, 350 instead of 120 kilowatts. When we started developing engines for the current cycle in 2011-2012, we couldn't imagine what would be possible by 2014, the engineer compares. Currently, the regulations stipulate that the battery weighs between 20 and 25 kilograms. No manufacturer conceals the fact that charging the battery would be difficult, so it doesn't run out of power. To do this, the engines will purposely burn part of the sustainable fuel, between 20 and 30 kilograms. The tanks will not shrink as a result. If the driver doesn't request torque, that will happen automatically in the background. With the sustainable petrol, we think this is an acceptable approach to the problem, says Thomas. Mercedes simulations show that tracks like Monza, Baku and Saudi Arabia are the most essential because of their long straights and full throttle parts. If the future engines were coupled with the existing chassis, there would be significant derating before corners. That is, the engine would enter charge mode early, causing the cars to lose a lot of speed. We need first-class chassis rules to counter the state-of-the-art engine, says Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff. But does anyone believe that Formula 1 is incapable of writing rules so that drivers don't have to downshift on the straights? From another manufacturer, we hear, you can spin the simulations any way you like to make policy, or you take some that have been around for several months. The more you try out and simulate, the fewer problems there will be. In any case, everyone concerned agrees that the aerodynamics must be greatly improved. That implies dramatically lowering the drag of the cars. A high-ranking engineer calculates, we're talking about 50% less drag to meet the targeted engine formula. Horner is correct when he expressed fear that the slipstream effect may disappear. Formula One also considered fan cars, such as the Brabham BT46B from 1978, which had a rear fan that sucked air from the underbody and therefore substantially increased downforce. The wings might have been removed from the cars at that point, but there is another option: active aerodynamics. Then the computer decides not the driver, says world champion Verstappen. Cars will be made shorter. This minimizes air resistance and saves weight. The FIA must make sound choices without overcomplicating matters. The more the complexity, the greater the danger of failure. The chassis rules for 2026 don't have much time to develop. It is advisable to decide this year, or at the very least in the first few months of 2024. We'll have to wait and see what they decide. So, Red Bull will now continue to use its own engine brand, Red Bull Powertrains. From 2026, the British team based in Milton Keynes wants to supply its own engines in collaboration with Ford. Already, 350 people are working on the creation of this new engine. Red Bull concedes that competing with the new regulations and Ferrari and Mercedes engines would be difficult, but they are sure that they have the resources to make this endeavour a success. Verstappen says that engine development is progressing quicker than planned. "It's an incredibly interesting project for us," begins Max. "I also think it's very important to see what happens, also for my future within the team. And what I see looks very promising. Of course, it will be difficult to compete with Mercedes and Ferrari, but the omens are good. Now we still have to try to live up to it," Verstappen explained. "I think we've started at the right time. We are ahead of schedule. But before you know it, it's already 2026, so there is still some work to be done." Verstappen concludes cautiously optimistic. "I think we're on the right track, but of course we have to keep pushing to deliver a very strong engine." What are your thoughts on the proposed engine changes? Are they a good change for Formula One? And what about the current battle about the engine split? Does it seem reasonable to you to alter the regulations? And if so, why? And what would you like to see changed? As things are standing right now, we'll see a lot of changes to try and achieve zero emissions amongst F1. Let us know how you feel about these changes in the comments down below.